In this lesson, we'll be discussing the difference between molecular and empirical formulas, and we'll do this by doing 6 separate examples. To start, the empirical formula for a chemical compound is the smallest whole number ratio of atoms in the molecule. Think of it as the simpler molecular formula. Let's start with question A. Here we have C4H8. This is a molecular formula because it can be reduced. Notice that we have the subscripts 4 and 8. What we have to do is find the greatest common factor that will divide equally into both 4 and 8. And it's usually the smallest number within the formula. The smallest number here is 4. So if I divide 4 by 4, I end up with 1, C1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2, H2. As you should know by now, there's no need to write down a 1. We assume that it's one atom. Therefore, our empirical formula here is CH2. Let's move on to part B. Here we have B2H6. We have to find out the greatest common factor, and in this case it's 2. I found out really quickly by looking at the smallest number here. The smallest number is a 2, so by dividing this by 2 I end up with B, and dividing this by 2 I end up with H3. This is my empirical formula. Both this and this are the exact same chemical. In question C we have CCl4. The greatest common factor here is 1. So the empirical formula and the molecular formula are the exact same thing. We don't need to make any changes. Before we move on to D, E, and F, you can do this mathematically by writing out the numbers. Let's say we have 4 and 8, like this, and finding out numbers that multiply into 4 and 8. Numbers that multiply into 4 are 1, 2, and 4. Numbers that multiply into 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. The greatest number here is 4, and that's what you divide the subscripts by. Let's move on to part D. In part D we have C5H12. Neither of these subscripts, 5 and 12, have any factor in common. So that trick I told you earlier, where you divide by the lowest number, won't work in this situation. Therefore, the molecular and empirical formula are the same in this compound. In question E we have Hg2Cl2. 2 can be divided into both of these subscripts, giving us HgCl. And finally, in question F, we have C2H4O2. The greatest common factor here is a 2. We divide this by 2, we end up with C1, H2O. And there you have it, 6 examples where we convert between molecular and empirical formulas.